Hi everybody, it's Colin Stevenson, joined by my hero John Lenhart. Hi John.
Hi.
Today we're going to talk about synaptic pruning, and we have spoken about it before. We have explained it, but we're nearly 100 videos ago. So John is going to give us a refresher, and bear in mind we're on John's story now. And so this is between elementary school and high school, and where the split comes, where we go through puberty, and this is where it's make or break, and the ultimate dissolve, I believe you called it.
Yeah. So if you remember when we were talking about people syncing their thought processes and the whole world syncing their thought process with that Strauss-Howe generational model, what's happening is the reason why that's happening is synaptic pruning. So what synaptic pruning is before the age of 13, everybody has all access to all their dendrites. And those are the trees, in their brain. So you see these TV shows used to be, are you smarter than a fourth grader or a fifth grader or whatever? Hey, none of us are smarter than a fourth or fifth grader. They have access to all of their brain. However, at 13, we have this thing called synaptic pruning, which I'll explain in a second. And now we're not as smart. So everybody in the world goes through this massive brain event around the age of 13. So what you got to imagine is your brain is a forest full of trees, and you can go anywhere in that forest. And what happens is you tend to go through that forest in a certain path. You wear a path in your brain. At 13, glia cells, these little cells come in and synaptic pruning happens. And the branches are chewed away from all the connections away from the paths that you took the most. So we all lose access to parts of our brain at 13. That's why at 14, drug abuse and problems with the law occur, because now we have people that have lost access to their brain. In my story, I was this super smart kid. And what you're going to see is I go through massive synaptic pruning, and I'm not the super smart teenager anymore. Because this is conscious brain. This is access in your conscious brain. So what's happening is that we lose access. So everybody under the age of 13 could be a genius, could load up their brain with all these facts and have all these connections. And that's why so many people brag about how smart their kids are before 13, because they are smart.
Yep. And what you'll find is usually the ones that are bragged about when they're young, the parents don't want to talk about them when they get to their teenage years, because the synaptic prunings come and they take a different path or the wrong path, and it becomes difficult. I find with what you're talking about the synaptic pruning, so I found myself, I was very kind of gifted as a child, but then after synaptic pruning came in, I was easily distracted. So that I was always, I was never paying the same amount of attention. I had the same kind of potential, but I wasn't able to use it.
Right, and we're going to talk about why that happens and how to fix that. But so the point back to the Strauss-Howe and the generational model is these kids. What happens at 13 is they kind of embrace the thought process of their surroundings and they get locked into it. And so that's why this thing goes every 20 or so years, is we have these kids at 13 locking in, and then they take 7 years to go down a level. And so that's why every 20 to 22 years, the thought process moves down. So really you could tie it all back to synaptic pruning is why we have this, deterioration of the thought process. Now, I was teaching this to a parent, and they had a kid who was entering 7th grade, and they said, these school principals know this. He goes, the principal gave us this speech, hey, everybody, your 7th grader, they're going to go away. Your kid you knew as a 6th grader is going to disappear during 7th grade, but don't worry, they come back in 8th grade, because everybody realizes something happens in 7th grade where these kids are just like aliens. Well, what's happening is at different times, you have 3 types of kid in 7th grade. In 6th grade, they all have access to all their trees. And in 8th grades, they don't. But in 7th grade, you have 6th graders, You have people who are going to be eighth graders, and then you have people who are undergoing the actual synaptic pruning, and they're starting to lose those connections, and they're starting to lose that energy. We get a lot of energy with those connections. They start losing that energy. So this is what's happening. It's not puberty. Synaptic pruning basically cuts the brain down to the pathway, and then puberty creates a super highway out of that path. Puberty supercharges them. So the way to look at this is basically, in the past, they used, more than 100 years ago, and this is where the educational system is failing us, Colin. This is why I'm so passionate about this, is what's happening is more than 100 years ago, teenagers regularly changed the world. You know, Mozart, Joan of Arc, Alexander Hamilton, Alexander the Great, these were teenagers doing amazing things because their brains were ready for synaptic pruning, which pruned down to their uniqueness, and then puberty supercharged them and they were awesome. Instead, what we do is we sync kids prior to synaptic pruning, and I'm going to explain how we do that. And then we use synaptic pruning to bring them back up to equal. And then we go, there's no problem. We used the supercharge to pull them out of the hole rather than put them on top of a mountain. How did we do that? What we did was we let these kids interact and take each other down.
Yep.
So I like to say, you know, if you think about 10, 11, 12-year-olds, would you let them go to school with a knife or a gun?
No.
No, they'd hurt other people. But we let them go to school with words and sentences that emotionally and mentally hurt people.
Yeah.
And I like to say, if you get physically hurt, the way that gets repaired is mentally and emotionally. Mental and emotional repair is stronger than physical repair because there's some things physical repair won't fix. And mental emotional abuse is worse than physical abuse.
Absolutely.
So what we do is we push these kids together, 10, 11, 12. They hurt each other. They bully. They form trees that they obsess over that have negative emotions. And they visit that every day. And then their brain synaptically prunes down to those negative emotions. And all their thoughts went through it. And now they're depressed. And now they have all these issues. We have a video, short video animation explain it. We'll link to this. But that's what we're doing. The key is to help these kids prepare their brain for the synaptic pruning. I like to say, if we would take 10 years and prepare kids for synaptic pruning, so for the next 10 years, we kept preparing kids, we would be living in Wakanda.
Yep.
These kids would be geniuses. They'd have all this technology stuff. We are missing out on a bunch of geniuses. And that would dissolve all the issues in the world. I like to say every issue in the world can be traced back to that person synaptically pruning. All of Trump's issues are when he's synaptically pruned.
Yep, absolutely.
Really, what we're dealing with is a bunch of middle school kids who didn't synaptically prune to their uniqueness, and now they're trying to effort their way through stuff, and we are all paying for that. We could dissolve every problem in the world, every single problem in the world, if we help kids synaptically prune. I made that point to all the influencers on LinkedIn. I never got a response from any of them. But that is the way to dissolve every issue in the world.
So what you're trying to say is if they're not working with their uniqueness, they're trying too hard to be something that they're not. And this is why we get everyone, so don't get me wrong, we've got some decent people being influencers that are doing the right thing wrong, or the wrong thing right, whatever way you want to look at it. And it's not because they intentionally know what they're doing right or wrong. It's just because that's the way they've been synaptically pruned and the way that they've learned growing older.
Right. I say you got to do something. So now the way I've been explaining this lately is with the driver and car analogy. So if you remember, my model for the mind and the brain is you are an intangible driver. Your uniqueness is intangible. You're the driver of the car. Your brain is the car. So what you have is 90% of that car, it provides all the energy. You don't interact with it directly. That's your unconscious brain. 10% of that car, you interact with directly. That's your conscious brain. The steering wheel, the gas pedal, the brake. Synaptic pruning affects your conscious brain. So here's what's happening. All these kids before 13, it's like they could drive any car. They could drive a Lamborghini. They could drive a Jeep. They could drive, a station wagon. They could drive any car. And they feel like, I can do anything. Give me any, they can use their brain however. But their uniqueness is a certain type of driver. Some people's uniqueness is to be a truck driver. Some people's uniqueness is to drive a Lamborghini. When synaptic pruning happens, they get synaptically pruned down to one car, and it's rarely the car that matches their driver. So this is what your teenager's going through, 13 and 14. One day they go to drive their car and they turn the radio up and the windshield wipers start going. They hit the gas and the steering wheel turns to the left.
Yeah.
And they start freaking out. I no longer can drive my car. And they start panicking and they just start pushing out and they start doing all the stuff. And that's how they learn to get by. Just to go nuts, to just, try harder, do all the stuff. But their car no longer, they have lost the ability to drive any car. And the car they're pruned to is not matching them. And now they're freaking out. And when I explain this to teenagers, their unconscious brain shuts them up. They just stare at me like, and I know their unconscious brain going, listen, he's telling you what happened. And all these teenagers just like, holy cow, that explains it. That's the way I felt. I could no longer drive this car all of a sudden. I was just in a class of 7th and 8th graders this past week, and we were talking about this. And I said, how did you feel in 5th and 6th grade? And these kids all said, I was so confident in 6th grade. I didn't give it. And then we all go, well, sometimes we go, you're the oldest, and then you got moved up. It has nothing to do with that. You were able to drive any car in 6th grade. And somewhere during 7th grade, you stopped being able to drive any car, and you got locked into a car that didn't fit you, and you got frustrated. And then puberty kicked in all those emotions, and now you're super frustrated and awkward. Whereas more than 100 years ago, people were taught how to synaptically prune to the car they drove, and puberty caused them to change the world.
Yeah. So that means in a whole is lack of identity, because what they do is they then go and search or create an identity which is not their intangible driver. And what they do is they put themselves out. I want to be that multimillionaire executive. I want to be that teacher, and I want to be this vet. And so then they start to live their life according to what they think they want to be, which again, we can have jobs, careers, and lives that are not matching our intangible driver. So it's really a snowball effect, is what you're talking about. From 13 to 14, they'll try and fail, try and fail, try and fail, try and fail. And then before you know it, they've not got any self-confidence. They are a poor mentally health adult. And what they do is they feel their life's destroyed until they then meet this supermodel for the mind and brain that allows them to relearn their intangible driver and begin to work with it.
You just said the next thing I was going to say. So let me just fill in all the blanks. That was perfect. So what I do is when I deal with kids, I always ask, how old are they? Because if they're younger than 13, the goal is to help them find their uniqueness, embrace it. We've talked all about this because they'll synaptically prune into their uniqueness. If they're after 13, I have a 2-step process. Number one is I want them to learn how to drive their current car safely. So I spend half of the school year talking about communication and repair. They are driving a car they are not matched for. I get it. It's frustrating. Let's drive this car safely so you don't crash it, hurt yourself, hurt other people. And that's all communication and repair. All the stuff we've done early on in all our videos. I spend the second half of the year when they're able to drive their cars safely. I spend the second half of the year doing what you said, is now the way to get your car back is to understand your uniqueness and act in that, not in what you want your uniqueness to be, but in what your uniqueness actually is. And you will get that car back. And that's what I do for adults. That's what you realized with the intangible driver test and everything. And that's why we went through all these intangible drivers. It's like, if you want that feeling back you had, 10, 11, 12, when you were just full of energy, get your brain to match your driver. Yeah. Well, if you operate that way in your driver, your brain will start matching it. You'll start using it that way. You'll start strengthening those connections, and then you'll go back to that. So that's what I do the second half of the year, is help people match back to it. Now, what does that mean if you think about it? There's 49 intangible drivers. Is there a chance that, someone like, let me just make up a name, Oprah, when she was 14, said, I'm going to be this person, and it happened to match her intangible driver? Is that possible? It's like a 2% chance, right? And then what happened? She started operating that way. It matched her uniqueness, and boom, right? Now, what would our friends, the consultants, tell everybody?
That they, I would imagine they said it was like, I don't know, it was like fate, or it was an accident, or would they?
Or she efforted, and if everybody would be like Oprah, that would work for them.
Yeah, that's Tony Robbins says that. That's what Tony Robbins says.
2% of people. 2% of people that would work for.
If you do
this is the deal with consultants. They do the wrong thing really, really well. So they come up with a whole program of what did Oprah do? This is Covey. What did these people with highly effective habits do? Let's not worry about their uniqueness. Let's just look at the effects, and let's just get everybody do these habits. It worked for Oprah. It should work for you. If Oprah is an animal or a robot, then it would work for you.
Yeah.
But everything comes back to synaptic pruning. And all these consultants are doing the wrong thing, calling everybody a robot and animal super well. They got these programs, they look great, their music, they pump you up, they have all these steps, they have all these resources. They're doing it really well. They're doing the wrong thing really, really well.
Yeah. And this is where it becomes harder to find one person's identity, because they're trying to be somebody else's and train their brains the way somebody else would train theirs, train their uniqueness the way somebody else would train theirs. And this is where the problems come in. When we get asked a question, and consultants do it as well, and they ask the right questions, they just don't know how to put it out. I have a consultant ask me, who are you? And up until 2 years ago, I used to say, I'm a this and I'm a that. And no, who are you? But they couldn't tell me who they were either. And this is where I find the problem. So you're asking me this question. You're going to tell me who I am. You're going to tell me what I am. And you can't tell me who you are, what you are. How does this work? And then I meet you.
Right. And so the thing is why not get this right in the first place? I love talking to 10, 11, 12-year-olds.
Yep.
I love helping them figure out who they are. And we talked about this. Understand who you are, embrace it, and then communicate it. So you set your context to look at you that way. So you stay in that mode. And then when you synaptically prune down to that, you match your car, and then, it takes off. So it's a lot of this. If we're not teaching these kids 10, 11, 12 how to communicate, we're allowing them to wreck each other's trees. They obsess over the wrong trees, and then they never do that the right way. So what I did is I came up with these speeches. They were 90-second speeches that I would give to these 6th grade classrooms. I'd go in, and once a week I give this 90-second speech to help them start preparing for synaptic pruning. And they became so popular that we decided we were going to videotape them. And Jonathan came up with the genius idea of, Flowcess believes you learn unconsciously.
Yep.
So why would we tape you giving the message, John, to people directly? Why don't we tape you giving the message to another group of students so the kids would get it indirectly? And I'm like, that's genius. And then Jonathan took it up another notch. He said, what if the classroom was made up of 7 ridiculously distracting students, and I played all of those?
Yep.
Jonathan's the most talented man I know. And he decided, I was like, this is blowing my mind. Like, this is the greatest idea of all time. So we taped this series, 20 episodes. They're about 5 minutes each. It's called Mr. Lenhart's Class. There's 90 seconds of my conscious brain teaching, surrounded by 3.5 minutes of Jonathan being ridiculous. And the whole point is to distract the kids consciously so that the information goes in unconsciously.
Yep.
And what happens is it's so funny. We show this to classrooms and they think it's stupid. And that's good because we want them to be distracted by how stupid it is. And then I've had kids put their heads down and not want to watch it. And after the third or fourth episode, it starts and the logo and everything comes on and they stick their head up because their unconscious brain goes, come on, you want to see this. And it is just, again, it's called Mr. Leonhardt's Class. It is amazing. And so we've been putting that in the school system. And that's something that in September, we want to offer all these schools to be able to purchase it and to look at it for their class, but even for adults. If you have a 10, 11, 12-year-old out there, this is something probably by the end of summer that we're going to have for people to be able to actually purchase to help their kids get through this. And that has been some of the most rewarding things that I've done, is that to actually have this, because one of the things is I walk into these schools. What happens is we show the video without them seeing me in person. And then after 3 or 4 episodes, I walk into a classroom and I'm like a rock star. The kids just and then they all ask questions and they all want me to teach them. And I want to teach. So I'm playing this character who's a teacher, and the kids like the character, and the kids want to feel like they're in the class with these ridiculous students. So they want me to teach them. And when I start teaching them, they're like, I'm in his class and I get to teach. I told Jonathan, the biggest gift you ever gave me was creating this character of Mr. Leonhardt, because now when I deal with kids who see it, I get to be myself and they'd want me to teach.
Now, my son, I see every fortnight. And about just over a year ago, when he was just turned 10, you told me, I've got this Mr. Leonhardt's Class, because you'd worked with you and I, we'd done it so that I understand you and we understand the model, etc. And then we went on to Mr. Leonhardt's Class. Every fortnight, my son used to get in my car when I picked him up outside his mum's house and say, have we got some more Mr. Leonhardt's Class? Not, hi Dad, how are you? How was your week? How's my sister? How's nothing? Have we got more Mr. Leonhardt's Class this week? And I will never forget how his face was when I said, this is the last 2. So that was 10 fortnights. So we managed to stretch them out because it was that length of time. Obviously, most children would do it and learn quicker, but his face, and they are ridiculous, okay? It's hilarious, but I also learned as well. And I also learned how I should be speaking to my child. And this is where I found the value just grew. So yes, they're learning unconsciously, they're learning, but then I learned how to speak to my kid. And I remembered how to be a kid again and have that fun and have that conversation. And it's not, I'm the dad, you're the son. It was, tell me more about that, please. How do you feel about it? Wow. And it was just like brain blown completely.
Yeah, it really helps the social connectivity. And there's a city, a community up here that wanted to fix this whole community in the next 40 years to make it the greatest place to live. And they identified the biggest issue with social connectivity. Mr. Leonhardt's Class would have fixed that, because for just the reason you said is the teachers end up learning it. And then I have teachers that I've told is watch this at home with your husband in the same room. He doesn't even have to watch the screen. It will unconsciously change his behavior.
Yep.
So it's really a very powerful series. It definitely improves people's ability to be social connectivity. And that's the whole goal. The way you prepare a student for synaptic pruning is 2 things. One is you help them learn how to communicate in a way that is safe and can repair.
Yep.
Because you want to repair all the dendrites before synaptic pruning and get access to them. You don't want them having bad dendrites that they're obsessing over, because all their thoughts are going to go through that. And then the second thing you want is the kid to operate in their uniqueness. You want to encourage them to run their car, drive the car you're built for. Because when you synaptically prune, you get stuck with that car. And that's a good thing, because then you get supercharged. I shouldn't try to be everything. I should have a brain that matches my uniqueness. Yeah. So all of this stuff, everything everybody's dealing with, really all comes back to synaptic pruning. And I wish one influencer or billionaire would actually say, let's fix everything and contact me and rush through this, because I feel good. I'm going to die on this hill, because this is I have documented this, and I don't care if it takes 100 years or whatever for people to figure this out. But when they figure it out, just like with ACOF, just like if people are finding out ACOF was right and we didn't know it, hey, I don't mind. After I'm dead, if people realize I was right, at least they figured out I was right.
Yep. And what we can do is we can take pre-orders or anything for people wanting to show interest. We'd be happy to discuss with them as well. So thank you for today. Thank you for explaining synaptic pruning in more depth as well, because there was a few things there that you taught me there as well, which is excellent. So thank you. And I look forward to the next episode. Thanks very much. Cheers, John.
Bye.